The Information Technology and Government Affairs Committee will now come to order. We have 15 items on the agenda. Are there any cards on items 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15? See no cards on those items. We'll move items 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 on consent. Without objection, that'll be the order of the committee. And with item number 10, is there an amendment that was submitted to item number 10?
Yes, for the record, we'd like to adopt the item as amended to include the approval of the new resolution in lieu of the original.
Okay.
So that would be our recommendation.
All right. Seeing no cards before us on item number 10, that is what is before us, to adopt item number 10 as amended. Without objection, that's the order of the committee. Okay. Now we are moving to item number... Item number 5. It seems to be a quicker item. Item number 5, please announce.
On item 5, the Department of General Services has submitted a report and ordinances. This is regarding the proposal to sell 11 surplus city-owned properties located throughout the city, and this will be at public auction.
Okay. Any staff here on item number 5? Seems to be a very straightforward lease.
I'm sorry, my mistake. I read item 6.
Oh, okay.
Item 5 is the lease with Chase Morgan for Space 10 at the LA Mall.
Okay, which is an ATM. Okay. It appears that the rent will be generating $1,748.50. Otherwise, also accumulating $20,982 annually to the general fund. Are there any questions from the committee on that item?
I have a question.
Okay.
Regarding the Merchants Association fee, I think we need to reevaluate that for the folks who are there. It seems that fee is ridiculously low, not to impact this particular, which is going to be a kiosk for an ATM. But if the merchants are only paying $40.35, there's not much improvement they can make for maintenance at $40.35 a month.
All right.
Just
So,
as a side note to that matter of the, I approve the proposal, but I just have,
would that be a question to GSD to bring the committee up to speed at another date on the merchant fee?
David Pascal from GSC. Yes, it would be an excellent idea, and actually, Councilman Zine, is something that we're currently looking at as we establish what the new fair market rates ought to be for that space.
Okay.
And as you know, it's something that was recently done over at El Pueblo, where they went through a meticulous process of trying to determine what
Did you almost say manipulated protest? Because
meticulous.
that must have been a Freudian slip. I apologize. But at any rate, they went through a pretty elaborate process to establish what the common area maintenance fees ought to be. We're going to move through that same process.
Because I think if we had some dollars, we could improve, and I was down there yesterday.
Yes.
We could improve the appearance, painting, cleaning up. But at $40 a month from the vendors, I mean, you're basically receiving no compensation to maintain and to attract more pedestrians and more civic employees to go visit.
So when would GSD be ready to?
Give us about maybe 60 to 90 days to get back to you.
Because you're already working on it, so you give us a much
Yes.
more comprehensive report.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
We look forward to hearing from GSD on that matter. Again, we're on item number 5. I do not see any public comment cards on item number 5. Is anybody here to speak on item number 5 from the public? Seeing and hearing nobody come forward for item number 5 for comment on item 5, we will approve the GSD report as recommended. That item is approved. With that, again, hopefully this item will go quickly, is item number 6. Do we have somebody here from Bernard Parks' office? No? Okay, we'll wait on item number 6 until somebody from Bernard's office comes. I thought the council member said he was sending somebody. Not necessary if you already have the information.
No, we have information already.
Okay, we have the information. Okay, announce item number 6, please.
Item number 6, the Department of General Services has submitted a report and ordinance. This is relative to a proposal to sell 11 surplus city-owned properties located throughout the city, and they'll be sold at public auction.
Okay. Thank you. We're on item number 6. Is there anybody here from the public to speak on item number 6? I do not see any cards before me. Okay. With that, public comment on item number 6 is now closed. The Councilmember Parks did let me know that items number 1 and number 5, as they're listed on the list of 11 properties, those are 2 of the smaller properties on the list, by far 2 of the smaller properties when it comes to value, and he wanted us to make sure that those 2 items were pulled from the list before we go forward. If there's no objection, we will move that item, absent parcel number 1 as it appears on the list, and item number 5 as it appears on the list. Okay, without objection.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
With the other council offices, Council Office 1, 15, 11, were they consulted on these matters?
It's my understanding that they're aware of it, and unless they brought up anything like Mr. Parks did,
Okay.
then they'll have another crack at it when it gets to the council floor. Okay. But thanks for asking. Seems like most of them are in District 11.
Yes.
Okay, with that, having removed parcel number 5 and number 1 from the list, so we'll move the report as amended. Okay, without objection, that is the order. Okay, now, we will resume back to the list in order of as they appear on the agenda. Item number 1.
On item 1, the city clerk is here to report on 2011 service changes and other budget-related items. This will be a verbal report.
Good afternoon, Councilman and members of the committee. Would you like me to give a little overview of?
Absolutely, please.
Very good, very good. Okay. I understand that the committee is interested in some specific questions as to the impacts of ERIP, transfers out, fiscal crisis on the city clerk's office. You wanted to know how many staff has our department lost over the last year as a result of ERIP layoffs and attrition. The answer is nearly a 40% loss of staff. We dropped from 142 to 105 positions approved, of which only 90 are actually filled. The hardest hit were land records. We lost 63%, and subsequently were so not able to function, and for various other reasons, the entire division was transferred in its entirety to the Bureau of Engineering. Records management is down 50%. There are only 3 staff remaining in that division, and that includes the chief. And because of the drastically reduced staffing, they are closed every Friday. Systems is down nearly 40%, and these are the essential personnel that facilitate the services for council and public services and for our elections. And our council and public services division, who are your minute clerks and your council clerks and your committee clerks, we are down 34%. And our administrative services, which handled mayor and council payroll, personnel, GCP, bids, and other fiscal services for the electeds, the CLA, and our own office, is down 27%. You also wanted to know what the clerk's core functions are. As mandated by the city charter, we are charged to provide high quality and timely legislative support to the council and its committees. This would involve staffing the council meetings, the committee meetings, putting out agendas on time, conduct the meetings and memorialize them and keep full records. The impact to the loss in our council and public services division is such that I myself am personally staffing committee meetings because there are simply not enough staff left to cover the 3 times a week council meetings and 19 council committee meetings, not to mention numerous special meetings called on demand. The stress level to keep up with the Brown Act deadline schedule is to the point that our staff is exhausted. We're resulting in an even heavier workload for staff that remain. And honestly, we're starting to make mistakes, and this is a dangerous exposure for the city. Our Administrative Services Division is mandated by the Admin Code, and we are charged in the Admin Code to provide a full range of accurate and timely accounting, personnel, and payroll services for the entire City Council, for the Mayor, for the CLA, and our own office, and also to administer the Business Improvement District program. How it has impacted us there is only a few entry-level staff remain in that section without daily supervision. We are not able to perform our traditional range of payroll and personnel services for the mayor, council, CLA, and our own office. We are making mistakes, and this is not acceptable when we are handling the payroll and the personnel of the city's elected officials. We have staff only sufficient enough to perform only minimal fiscal and accounting services for contracts, fund transfers, etc., and the wait times are getting longer and longer. I already told you about records management is down to 3 people, closed every Friday. Our records center at Piper Tech literally is comprised of thousands and thousands of square feet of stored legislative files and records. These are essential research documents for legal cases and all of the city's historic archives. We are down to 4 days a week and longer wait times. Our systems staff supports our charter-mandated functions. These are the folks that are the wizards. They help us electronize all the internet-based and systems-based technology systems and relieves us of repetitive paperwork. However, we are so down in that system that we lost so many to ERIP and transfers to other departments. We can provide only minimal service for council and public services, for elections, with longer wait times. And what really is disheartening to us is the inability to take on proactive, cost-effective new projects. In other words, kind of like eating our seed corn. We don't have enough. We're only able to stop the fires as they occur and not be able to invest time in more time-saving kinds of projects. And our last mandate by the charter is to run fair and open elections for the city of Los Angeles. So we lost, the city clerk's office pretty much lost our most experienced employees to ERIP, and we lost quite a few also who, perfectly understandable, bailed out to safer proprietary departments. We lost most of our systems staff, and that provides a thinner margin of safety for the competent running of our elections. We did lay off an employee. We did lay off our entire calligraphers unit. They no longer work in the clerk's office. And for all the vacancies we have left, we are under the mandate to keep them vacant. So after ERIP, what we were left with were arbitrary holes throughout our entire work hierarchy, all the way from entry level to management. And as not unique to our department, but pretty much all departments, we had no rhyme or reason where the gaping holes were going to appear. And since we have limited ability to backfill them, we are pretty much using a duct tape method to stop new leaks that spring up every few days. We used to pride ourselves on operating like an efficient machine, but right now we are kind of limping along in fits and starts. Staff is taking on double and triple work. That does not take into consideration office shortages because of furloughs and regular vacation and sick time. We are finding that entry-level employees are necessarily being assigned to work on senior-level tasks. Mid-level supervisors are being assigned to upper management-level work. There is very little first-line supervision. Nearly all my supervisors E-ripped out. Management is taking on the additional role of day-to-day work and handling our own, well, I guess I'll just put it this way. Myself and my executive officer, we handled the emergencies and overflow. We handled this daily constituent phone calls, legislative requests, press inquiries, and scores of other ministerial tasks that other staff would normally handle. If you ask me what could we foresee for the future, what I will tell you is pretty much the work of your city clerk is driven by the pace and amount of work generated by the council. So we do find it very helpful when the council offices understand our limits and are able to adjust their requests accordingly. However, in a furlough environment, it is difficult for council and public services to schedule last-minute special meetings, special motions, or rush projects and requests in our admin services because we simply don't have the staff to hop to as we would have loved to do in the past. I have the best staff in the world. I'll say that over and over again, but I do feel for them. They are struggling with a great deal of mental stress and exhaustion, and we are just doing the best we can until times get better. That's sort of a snapshot of the division, and if you have any specific questions, my EXO and I would be happy to answer them.
I don't know where to start, but I'll start with this. When it came to ERIP, the concept of ERIP wasn't to end up with arbitrary holes in our departments. Wasn't that the case? Weren't we supposed to see what happened with ERIP, try to figure out how it affected each department, in particular your department in this case, and then allow the departments to justify which positions to backfill or what have you. However, overall, having a reduced budget. Was that the basic concept of ERIP, or was it, come what may, whoever leaves, we're not going to fill their position, and we're just going to have to deal with it?
I guess I would perceive
The
that
latter seems to be what occurred, but
It was because of the budget. Holly Walcott,
a
office of
little
the
closer to the mic, please.
Holly Walcott, office of the city clerk. Basically, when it came to budget cuts, it was the vacant positions that were cut for 2010-11, so it became the arbitrary situation. While it may not have been the intent,
So you're talking about the empty 15 positions as it stands right now? Or you're talking about?
no, going into this year, into this fiscal year, what we basically ended up cutting to meet our budget cut goals were anticipated vacancies. Now, we still have some vacancies, and we're going through the managed hiring process to try and get some additional assistance. We do have 2 legislative assistant positions that were approved, and an accounting clerk position that was approved, and we're going through the process of hiring. But we should not, and we will not ask for additional positions until we know we can pay for them.
You're talking about above and beyond the 105 or above the 90?
Above the 90.
So, aside from ERIP, layoffs, and attrition, in addition to that, there's a fourth element impacting the number of people that are working within your department, and that element is vacant positions.
Vacant positions, but also operating at a deficit budget. We're about $130,000 in the hole right now. We'll probably make it up because that's a pretty insignificant shortage for us. But until we have made it up later in the fiscal year, it would be irresponsible for us unless additional resources were provided to go any further into the hole.
Councilman, I might offer in addressing your original question, when the ERIP program was put forward, I think all departments were expecting that they had no control over where the holes would develop because you had your senior people in all different areas of any working department. And as was expressed to us by the CAO and the mayor's office, in order to meet our budget necessities, the ERIP program was begun so that we could cut a lot of people from payroll quickly. But then we were kept under a threshold. They had told us that in order for the savings to be realized, we cannot replace everybody that goes on ERIP. That would take us back exactly to where we were before. So we were told you're not going to be able, I think it was something like 14% of 7%, and that would be citywide. So right now, any department that is seeking to fill essential positions does have to go through the managed hiring process. Managed hiring committee is made up of a representative, the mayor, the CAO, and the CLA. They meet once a week. Their decision must be unanimous, and they ask the hard questions. They want to know that the funding is there. They want a lot of rationale for why the position is necessary, and it is very challenging to be able to replace even a few of the gaping, holes that develop for us because of ERIP layoffs, transfers, discharge, et cetera.
And I take it categorically you're not considered public safety?
Categorically, we are not considered public safety.
But categorically, based on your core responsibilities, we could incur litigation costs if your department drops the ball on certain areas.
That is correct.
We could end up having, in our case, we're a self-insured city across the board, in every element, in every sense of the word. So therefore, every time we do something, oops, and then all of a sudden the public has a right to sue us or what have you, we get a judgment or a settlement or what have you, that comes against the same general fund that we were trying to save money from and reducing the personnel from 142, which is now at 90.
Yes,
So in a
correct.
roundabout way, we could be just feeding into our problem, our budget problem, if we're not careful and we end up incurring litigation costs.
That is correct. I think the one thing that, as we go forward, we'd like to be able to reinstitute is more first-line supervision, so that there is that check and balance system. There is somebody checking. For example, I don't send out a letter unless somebody else sees it. We all should be checking each other's work before it goes out.
And also, we have another city election coming up in a few months.
We have the
So,
municipal elections coming up in March of 2011 in May. Our elections division was exempt from the hiring freeze.
however,
Oh, no, we're going full force.
so
They are the only fully staffed division.
they will be. They're not fully staffed today, though.
They are fully staffed today.
They are fully staffed.
The as-needed staff aren't all. The as-needed staff that are normal for this time of year have been hired. There's another group that will be hired in December for warehousing, and then, of course, the final push near the end for the vote by mail and the election day poll workers.
Okay. Does that cause any stress on the rest of the department when that season comes about?
Only
Or-
on June
or-
and I.
But that's what I'm referring to.
Well, let me give you an example. We have 25 permanent election staff. We need every single one of them. If you compare the city of LA with other jurisdictions in California, like San Francisco or San Diego, they have more election staff per registered voter than we do. We're something like 0.000001, according to that list. In other words, we do pretty darn well. The size of our city and the size of our voter base with 25 staff. And as Holly said, as we get closer to election time, then we hire as needed. And on election day itself, we might have as many as 800 workers on that day. And then the day after election, we let them go, and then we're back down to the 25. But people have to remember that during the year, it isn't just the actual implementation of the municipal elections. There's necessary outreach that goes on during the year. We do LA Votes Committee, where we meet with voter advocacy groups like League of Women Voters and Common Cause. We have to have constant good relations with LA County Register Recorder and work with them on projects like a new voting system in our foreseeable future. Reaching out to constituencies that have perhaps felt disenfranchised in the past. In other words, we don't only work, the election division does not only work during election time. It is a year-round job.
And they also do other elections, such as Prop 218 and various pension boards. They do various other elections on an ongoing basis. But I think the biggest toll will be on June and I as we get closer, as we are unable to be in two places at once. And, running the day-to-day operation at City Hall and then also overseeing those decisions. And at some point in time, we'll have to delay which decisions are made.
Okay. Questions, Mr. Zine?
Regarding under contract, how many have been brought back under contract?
None.
No one? Okay.
Why is that?
Fiscal.
Don't have the money.
And the next question, there was money set aside for neighborhood council elections.
We're done with the 2010 series, and the next elections don't happen until 2012, so we did not ask for, nor were we allocated any funds for 2011.
Well, I think we're going to try and change the election process for the neighborhood councils.
That wouldn't impact our baseline budget. That amount of money, it was $1.2 million that we ended up with, that was put in for 2009-10 and taken out for 10-11. So any allocation you would make for 11-12 would be to whichever department you decided you wanted to handle, or if you decided you wanted the neighborhood council to handle themselves. But that allocation is not a part of our budget.
I thought you might have a surplus from what was already allocated.
We have to give that back.
Did you already give it back?
No, but it will be probably incorporated in one of the upcoming FSRs.
Yeah, we don't have authority to spend it unless,
So I'm saying, so maybe you don't have a deficit because you were given allocation.
But we can't keep it.
It's hard to predetermine that you...
it's all your money.
Money we saved.
Well, you were
Right.
you were given the money to run the elections, correct? Neighborhood council.
The neighborhood council elections, we didn't spend it all,
Right, and I'm saying that the money that's left, how much is left over?
about $600,000.
Okay, couldn't some of that be applied to your deficit?
That would be great if your
With your
committee-
authority.
They would have to take council action.
Right.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
No, I'm just saying, you haven't spent it, and it's money that's going to go back to the general fund.
Correct.
If you could balance your books, since you've been very frugal and haven't spent it all, you were given $2 million, you haven't spent it all, and I think because of the mood of the neighborhood councils, we're going to change that particular process. You did a great job in the environment of the elections, but the neighborhood council elections are a bit different than the municipal elections, and then
Right.
it's more informal. I'm just wondering if you would put a request in to see if some of that could help balance your books.
We could put it to very good use.
It might be an option for you. I don't know if it would pass, but I think at least
It's worth a try.
it'll get you out of the deficit column. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay, well, from what you gather, it sounds like, unfortunately, you're not the only department in this dire situation, but you're before us right now. It sounds like your department, even $600,000 today is just a whopping amount of money during this dire time. Now, being that that's an identified savings already after the process has concluded of what that money was funded for in the budget process, what would you envision would be, if there was the will of the council to rebudget that money back to your department? First of all, what do you think the quickest way that we could do that? And then secondly, what would be your first priorities with those dollars?
The quickest way is the financial status report, but I'm going to let June answer to her priorities.
We need staff. We need more supervisory staff. We desperately need more system staff, because with the high percentage of work that we do that's electronic, it is so much more effective putting money there, because it takes repetitive labor away from staff and creates efficiencies. We would love to be able to have a systems position, for instance, that would look into, for instance, agenda building programs for the council agenda, so that our committee clerks don't have to do it over and over by scratch, to develop perhaps a standardized report template that departments can use when they submit reports to the council, so that staff time isn't wasted by searching for a recommendation that may or may not exist there. We believe in putting the money wisely where it can have the most effect. And supervision and systems right now are our immediate needs.
So I'm sure there's a lot more need than what you just described, because $600,000 is nice, but I'm sure it doesn't go far enough to get you back into a place where you can actually handle all the responsibilities that you still have. So if you would like, unless, Dennis, you want them to report to your office, you're welcome to report to my office with a comprehensive game plan for that $600,000. I'll be more than happy to spearhead a motion on that. If you get over to my office tomorrow, we could see a motion right away. If it takes you a week, you're not going to see me take any action for at least for a week, but be ready to make sure that if there's any other moving parts, such as if IT should be involved in somehow in the recommendation of what kind of position it should be or something. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. You know, cross all your T's and dot all your I's, so that way we can be as comprehensive as possible about how we could move on that, and then I'll be more than happy to put a motion together. Again, unless Mr. Zine wants to spearhead it, or you want to co-present or second it, whatever. Okay. All right. So go ahead and get ready. If I see you in my lobby when I get out of this committee, I'll be more than happy to make time to sit down with you today. Okay?
Thank
I
you.
was joking about today.
Thank you.
If I didn't have other appointments, I would. But. Any more questions? Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
All right, we'll receive and file? Okay, verbal report. Okay, we'll move on to, okay.
We've got a catalog somehow, so we receive and file and notify. It's got to be some catalog. We
What
have
will
to
be the
have-
action on that
we
verbal
have to have some
report?
disposition.
There's no action on that.
Okay.
Nothing
Since
at
it's a
all?
verbal report, no action?
I'm sorry?
Since it's a verbal report, no action required?
There's no action with verbal reports.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee on item number 7? Otherwise, we can receive and file item number 7. No questions? Any questions?
Hold on a second. I don't think so. What?
That's item 7. If you have
No.
questions, we'll come.
Yeah, let's do that, yeah.
You have questions?
Yeah, a couple.
Okay. All right. Okay, we won't receive and file item number 7. So we'll go to the brass here for item 8. Okay. Since we have some brass here for item number 8, we'll go to item number 8. Sorry, they're public safety. They get priority, even in committee. On the budget, everywhere.
On item number 8, the chief legislative analyst has submitted a report, and there is an resolution associated with it relative to the city's position to support HR 3526. This will provide definition of terms and services related to community-based gang intervention.
Good afternoon, Annie Danino from the CLA's office. HR 3526, the Tony Cardenas Community-Based Gang Intervention Act, was introduced by Representative Diane Watson on October 22, 2009. This bill defines community-based gang intervention terms and services and incorporates the approach set forth in the community-based gang intervention model adopted by Council in 2008. To summarize, the community-based gang intervention model is a two-pronged approach that aims to minimize gang violence on the street and concurrently redirects gang members and their family towards rehabilitative services. Specifically, prong 1 of this approach focuses on deploying gang intervention specialists to reduce gang violence, utilizing strategies that include street mediation, truce building, and crisis intervention. Prong 2 of this approach focuses on the provision of intervention, rehabilitation, and reentry services. HR 3526 incorporates this model in four ways. First, the bill defines community-based gang intervention terms and services. Second, the bill requires the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention to award grants to eligible gang intervention agencies. Third, the bill provides gang intervention agencies and nonprofit organizations that are eligible to serve on grant advisory boards. And fourth, the bill adds community-based gang intervention terms and prevention activities to the list of eligible grant activities. And the status of the bill is that it was last referred to the Subcommittee on Healthy Families and Communities in October of 2009. And it's my understanding that since Representative Watson plans on retiring soon, Representative Bass is slated to pick up the bill. And we have representatives from Fire, Police, the Mayor's Office, and CDD to discuss the impact of the bill.
Thank you very much. Guillermo, can you give us a brief example of perhaps the difference between an intervention activity versus a prevention activity? And the reason why I want to say that is because even our city, for many years, we kind of blended intervention and prevention, and now this is the first jurisdiction that I'm aware of in the country that has distinctly made a policy distinction and put in writing that intervention and prevention are different components. They do have their place. We do fund intervention and prevention in the city of LA. But can you give us an example of what a distinction is between an intervention activity and a prevention?
Yes, sir. The intervention and prevention really are separated by the clientele that you serve. Intervention, a service is directed at youth and families that have already been determined to be either gang involved, gang affiliated, or involved in the culture. Whereas prevention, it could be primary prevention, there could be targeted prevention. Prevention services are directed at youth and families that are not yet involved in the mix. They may be determined to be highly at risk to being involved in the gang culture, but they're not. So it is the clientele that separates the two, and it is also the agency that delivers the service. So in the case of gang intervention, those services are primarily delivered by trained and professional gang intervention specialists that have developed the expertise at working with gangs, in mediating, in providing exit ramp services, etc.
For example, if you had a prevention provider, say an after-school program,
Correct.
and say they have somebody there for a couple hours after school, kids get out of school, the ones who stay on the campus, say they kick around a ball or play caroms or whatever they do these days, what have you, and that would be more of a prevention program.
That is a prevention approach, sir.
Okay. Now, that being the case, would it make sense if somebody had a true intervention program to take the profile of the person who helps check out balls and give carom sticks or what have you, and all of a sudden have that person provide intervention services in that same neighborhood?
No, that would not be appropriate.
Well, give me an example as to why that wouldn't be appropriate. You talked about the population difference.
Well, the population and the training.
Exactly.
And the training, the very specific training in relation to working with active neighborhoods, gangs, gang members, etc. The training of those two-level professionals are different. So it would be, I would say, I would equate it to the difference between having two physicians that have a different area of expertise. They may be both physicians, but they have different areas of expertise.
I like that analogy. I would say that the person with the caroms might be more of a general practitioner, but yet somebody who's an interventionist is more of a specialist. They deal in pulmonary, or they deal with cardiovascular, etc. It's a different kind of training. It tends to be more intense, correct?
Well, it is different. I think that the person doing prevention may be highly trained in doing cognitive behavioral therapy with 5-year-olds.
A general practitioner had to go to school for 8 years.
Correct. Correct.
And somebody who does specialists have gone to that 8 years, and then they did a couple more.
Correct. I guess what I'm implying is that they're both highly trained, but
Yes,
in
they're
different
both
areas.
professionals. Don't get me wrong. They're both professionals, but they are two distinct
That is correct.
approaches to solving whatever it is that they're working on.
That is correct.
Okay. And also, when it comes to the actual bill, this particular bill would hopefully actually, at the federal level, do what we've done at the city level, correct? Which is have defined language, so that if in case the federal government decided to fund intervention and prevention, if they funded intervention, that it would be based on the kinds of programs that apply those concepts and those processes at the local level that the federal government sends that money down to.
Right, exactly. And I think it incorporates that in the language of the OJJP Act, which, would make it much easier to incorporate those kind of activities in different grants.
I think it's kind of interesting that most people think it's kind of logical to see somebody in a police officer's uniform or somebody from the police department speaking on this matter, but you're from the fire department. What relevancy does intervention have with the LA Fire Department?
Thank you, Councilmember Cardenas, Councilmember Perry, Councilmember Zine. The relevance is significant because as first responders, oftentimes our firefighters and paramedics get on scene first, and we bring order to a pretty chaotic and life-threatening situation for those that could be victimized.
But for example, you're not necessarily worried about so much about showing up to a fire and to put out a fire when it comes to understanding intervention or having some knowledge and cooperation with interventionists. You're talking more, not exclusively, but more about a scene where you're actually first on the scene where there perhaps was a shooting or something like that, and your paramedics are there, and you got a fire truck there. So in other words, your personnel's there, and there was just a shooting occurred, and you're first on the scene?
That's correct. Yeah, and so if I could just back up a little bit, I failed to introduce myself. My name is Kwame Cooper, and I'm a member of the LA Fire Department. My comments are on behalf, I'm a battalion chief. My comments are on behalf of our fire chief, Millage Peaks, with regard to the fire department's gang intervention program. We value the role of gang interventionists as first responders and paramedics. We see it as a critical component to help us better serve the communities that we respond to. And so if I could just give you a brief history of how we got started and where we're at right now, would put in context why we as firefighters are in support of HR 3526, not only on its impact here locally, but the implications nationally. The LAFD began its gang intervention initiative early in 1995 when we entered a community partnership with our friend Mr. Bo Taylor from Unity One and also Akil Bashir from Maximum Force. That was in the mid-city area of the city where after the civil disturbance there was a huge uptick in violence with regard to so-called gang-related shootings and firefighters and paramedics responding. So Maximum Force organization came in and provided street survival training for the firefighters in that area as a pilot program. We subsequently began to expand that, where in 2005 we were invited by members of the Ceasefire Coalition in South Los Angeles as firefighters to participate in that committee as a way for us to better improve our relationships with gang members and gang interventionists. We looked at how we could better respond both as firefighters, paramedics, and also work with interventionists. So in 2007, we began a partnership with Maximum Force Enterprise to develop phased-in training for firefighters and interventionists. To give you a sense of what that looks like, in Phase 1, which we completed in March of 2008, based on the statistical data that we now can track in the fire department to pinpoint and target neighborhoods where the majority of the shootings are occurring, we looked at South Central Los Angeles and the Crenshaw community as our target areas. Phase 1 basically brought all of the interventionists together under Maximum Force Enterprise, where the firefighters came in and provided training to the interventionists so that they're real clear about what our protocols are when we show up. What that does, it helps us at the scene because we're there with LAPD or before LAPD, but oftentimes there's someone there that knows the neighborhood. And so we found that by having the interventionists work with us, it allows us to work faster and more efficiently to provide patient care. In that Phase 1 approach, we completed that in 2008, and then 6 months later we started Phase 2. Phase 2 is where we actually took the firefighters in those two communities and provided our policy expectations as first responders to the firefighters so they get updated on that. We also had LAPD there so that with regard to us working collaboratively together, we ensure that our communication and protocols are sufficient in terms of use of radios. And the third part was for Maximum Force to provide street survival, street smarts training to the firefighters as part of their tactical decision-making process. That training was delivered to 450 firefighters at this time. In December of this year, we will begin Phase 3, where we will take those same two targeted neighborhoods, and specifically with the captains that work in those firehouses, they will be brought together with the interventionists that are already trained to deepen the relationship between those two individuals so that when in fact the captain shows up on a fire truck with the firefighters and paramedics, and the interventionist is there, there's already some name recognition, there's already some face recognition, and it helps to bring a lot of order to the scene, which oftentimes is very chaotic. From that, we'll evaluate the outcome of these trainings, phase 1, 2, and 3, with Chief Peak's intention of expanding this citywide. Now, as you speak about the bill, I just wanted to add this as a caveat. This is a national issue with regard to first responders and this whole notion about gang intervention and the importance of developing relationships both with LAPD, community-based organizations, and interventionists. And so the fire service around the country is faced with the exact same phenomenon and also opportunity to look at a model that could begin to create some positive inroads that brings more safety to firefighters when we respond, and also a higher level of service to the neighborhoods that we go in.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us, because I think a lot of people may assume that gang interventionists are just out there in the community, but really don't interact with personnel such as firefighters, police officers, or what have you. We'll get an opportunity to have dialogue with some of our officers as well from the police department.
Yes, sir.
So thank you. Mr. Bashir, would you agree with what's been said so far about the dialogue that we've had on this matter for the last 15 minutes?
Greetings to the council. Respect being here. We totally agree. I think one of the most important aspects that has been missing from the whole circle of intervention is the established protocol and standard operating procedure, that would fundamentally create those interventionists to be assets as opposed to liabilities. I think in the fire service, as well as the police department, as well as other professional venues, what they look for is skill sets. They look for something that they can evaluate to see what that level of professionalism is predicated on. You just can't tell me you're a specialist and then expect me to accept that based on the fact that you've been in the neighborhood for 20, 30 years. So in working with the fire department, one of our key goals was to establish those protocols, fundamentally making sure the interventionist understood fire protocol as well as the fire department understanding intervention protocol. And you know, as Kwame has said, on a national level, this has been done. Texas, Washington, where we just came back from, and also Atlanta, this whole core is being implemented based on the strategical foundational oversight of creating a unified structure that can be utilized on a national perspective.
Now, I'm assuming it's not as simple as, say, the federal government say they do adopt this bill and then they do follow up with funding to local governments, local communities. I'm assuming it's not as simple as they open up an envelope and there's instructions on how to implement intervention programs. That community would have to have or come up to speed on how to develop intervention local programs in that local jurisdiction, correct?
Correct. Well, one of the things, and I think the city has moved forward with its training program, our training program specifically targets that arena. What we have done is we have brought interventionists that are totally ingratiated in the culture, understand that culture, and then we have developed the actual protocol and skill sets. They have a manual of operation in which they operate from. They're drilled from a practitioner's perspective in terms of the skill sets that would be required to utilize that. They're tested, and they're also put in actual street intervention on the street. We have a 4-week internship where we take them to the street and make sure that they can implement that which they say or that which they have mastered in the classroom.
Okay. So I gather that true intervention work is not really, it's not simple. It is a bit complex, correct?
It's not simple at all. I'm glad you said that, Councilman, because one of the things people really don't understand is, as you talk about gang intervention, you know, you have to talk about the holistic concept of violence intervention. When you go into a targeted community, excuse me, you just cannot concentrate on the fear factor and resolving the violence, you have to deal with the needs of that given community, and sometimes you have to go out of the box and bring a conglomeracy of solutions that's going to hopefully assist you in abating the gang or the violence problem. So, you know, real interventionists, true interventionists that know what they're doing, they wear a multitude of hats. They wear social hats. They wear psychological hats. They wear de-educational hats. I mean, and I think the real clear difference with an interventionist, he's very proactive, or she's very proactive, and they have to be. One of the things that we have implemented is a whole female intervention team, because the agenda of intervention has been male-dominated, and so many of the issues that we had to deal with were predicated around females. So, I mean, you have to really think out of the box, and you have to give credit to the interventionists, especially those that know what they're doing, because, again, they come in and have to be able to wear numerous hats.
Thank you. And also, fortunately for our city, we have had many years of experience developing as to where we are today. We're much more formalized. We have adopted policy, and also through the mayor's office, we actually have intervention prevention programs that are monitored now to a degree that they've never been monitored before in this city. We always had funding, but it was a little bit looser, much looser than it is today. Now it's much more defined, and the expectations and outcomes are actually measured and evaluated.
Could I just say one more thing,
Sure.
Councilman? I think when you talk about a national foundation, a national piece, one of the clear things, because interventionists do wear so many hats, is you have to create some type of generalized protocol that is utilized within those structures. So when you're talking about in Washington, when you're talking about in Chicago, when you're talking about New York, the interventionists are going to have a skeletal protocol that they know that they interrelate to and they operate from. That doesn't alleviate the difference in terms of the neighborhoods, because each neighborhood has its own individuality, but there has to be skeletal protocol that the interventionists can relate to and operate from.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Any questions from the committee for the people who are sitting in front right now? Because I do want to make sure that we have a couple people from LAPD here, make sure that they can address a couple questions as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
LAPD?
Good afternoon,
Unless you
Councilman.
don't want them. USC could have used you guys this weekend. But don't give them any help. I like the result.
Chief, are those your bodyguards now?
Yes, sir. Good morning, council members. David Doan, Chief of Detectives, LAPD.
Sergeant Lloyd Scott, Operations South Bureau, LAPD.
Sergeant Whittle, gang liaison for the department.
When it comes to what we're doing here in Los Angeles, I think you gentlemen have seen it evolve as what we're doing when it comes to intervention and prevention. Obviously, the police department is tied in very directly because a lot of the activity, unfortunately, does require the attention of the police department in the communities that have the most need of intervention prevention work. But what I wanted to ask you is, you are LAPD, the second largest city in the country, unfortunately the gang capital of the country. But we do have these kinds of issues around the country, certainly in big cities and medium and small cities, unfortunately. Following a model that we've developed here in Los Angeles, does it make sense that it could be used not as a strict model, but as a basis for a model in other cities throughout the country when it comes to dealing with these issues?
We think so, yes.
Okay, but fundamentally, what does intervention work on the streets add to the solution of hopefully reducing violence, certainly gang violence, things of that nature? What element does intervention give to the whole panoply of effort that we have going on?
Well, we see it as a tool to break the cycle of violence. Certainly when you look at gang activity, violence especially between gang members and different gangs, you see the retaliation efforts, and intervention goes a long way in trying to prevent retaliation. whether it's inside the gang for a perceived offense as a result of something, or whether it is to try to resolve a dispute between rival gangs. Interventionists play a significant role in helping us get into the leadership of those groups and getting them to recognize the futility of continuing to use violence. So it's a very critical part of our plans.
Isn't one of the elements that perhaps interventionists might be a little bit better equipped than police officers on the street? Say, for example, after a shooting of some sort, whether it was a shooting at a party or on the street, whether it seemed to be planned or random or what have you, isn't the interventionists aren't they a little bit better prepared than a police officer to try to infiltrate what really did happen? Because there's a lot of rumors that go on when an incident like that occurs, right? So when it comes to the rumor mill, do the interventionists seem to have an ability to get out there and hopefully squelch some of the rumors so that, and if they squelch rumors, does that tend to lead to hopefully less violence subsequent to an initial shooting, say?
And the short answer is yes. And I think the term that probably applies best is the license to operate. Typically, interventionists have relationships that run very deeply with individuals who are involved in these kinds of activities. So my understanding is they use those relationships to negotiate peace, much like you might handle a dispute between people who you're very familiar with, say a family situation. And basically, it's those relationships that enable them to develop some of the just ability to resolve the other issues that you heard some of the other panelists talk about earlier. It's the credibility that's built from being able to interact in very difficult situations that allows them to continuously resolve situations. And I think to answer your broader question, I'm sure that can be standardized as you look at how communities relate with both the police and with themselves in other parts of the country.
The critical aspect is the interventionists have to be out working in the community. You can't show up your first day and expect you're going to have results on preventing retaliation. You've got to be out there working in the community, knowing who the people are, building your credibility in the community. So it's not just a skill set, it also requires some work on the street.
And isn't one of now a police officer, their job is to keep the peace, but as you describe the license to operate or credibility within a community, isn't it that what happens is when an interventionist actually develops and is able to sustain that credibility, they're also seen as someone who's there to keep the peace, correct?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And let me give you an example for those people who might not understand what interventionists do and how they could complement keeping the peace. For example, if an incident occurs and then a police officer is driving down the street or what have you, it's very likely that the people that they might want to talk to might dissipate away from them, and then they really don't get to dialogue with somebody, try to get down to the bottom of it. As easily as perhaps an interventionist might literally walk up to an apartment unit where there's somebody in that unit that might know something about what happened. They could knock on that door. Instead of that person not answering the door or dissipating away, they would actually be able to dialogue with that person, and especially when it comes to an issue of trying to squelch the rumors. And the reason why I keep talking about rumors, some people are, well, what's a rumor? You know, you're on a high school campus and people are making rumors. They do that all the time. We're talking about rumors that actually could result in some kind of retaliation shooting where you have more death and destruction, correct? So when people hear the word rumor, in this context, a rumor could be deadly if it's not squelched or put in its proper place, correct?
Mm-hmm. Let me just add to this, Councilman, because you're not giving yourself enough credit. I know you're pulling it out of us, but between Assemblyman Bobby Scott and Assemblywoman Diane Watson, we're taking it on a national level, but you have brought it on the local level. You're right, absolutely, about the rumors. And as a police officer 25 years in the gang unit for 20, I did not believe in this stuff. Just did not believe in it. And now today I can sit here and honestly say I believe in it because it works. It's things that they can do that police officers, fire departments, or the city council can't do out there with the intervention. The good thing about it is they are now beginning to become professionalized to where they're actually getting recognized for really what they're doing. They've been doing it for years. We just kind of pushed it in the back. The fact that the funding now is starting to show these individuals the type of training that they have to work with the professionals as a police department and the fire department. We are just looking at astronomical decline in gang-related homicides, period. It's things that they can do that we will never be able to do. No one in this office will never be able to do, but they can do it. And the fact that we communicate with them now makes the whole system work better. But for years, I didn't believe in it. The Bo Taylors, the Akil Bashirs, and the fact that the mayor's office do have an organized, structured program is making it so much better for us at this particular point, right now. But I'm going to give yourself more props, Councilman, because I know for a fact your passion's there. I know for a fact that your passion's there, and I want to thank you for that, because it helps us move this along.
Thank you. Yes, you wanted to add?
Well, I was going to say that with that, and well said, Curtis, interventionists understand why violence occurs on a deeper level than I think we ever could, because they're so familiar with the players. And so they're able to drill, when they knock on the doors, they're able to address the real issues. And I think that's how they're able to stop the retaliation that we're after. They're able to stop the second, third, and fourth homicide from the one that would come from the first. So that, in a nutshell, is what I think they really offer.
Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is, everything that we've been talking about when it comes to intervention and its effectiveness here in Los Angeles as we know it, right? This isn't the only place where intervention work is happening, but we have a pretty solid perspective as to what we've done and what we've grown here in Los Angeles. The one thing that I find odd is when somebody might comment that having interventionists somehow takes away from police work or something.
No,
isn't it 100% complementary? There's no taking away here, correct?
No, I mean, it's the quality of the people. I mean, if they're good people and are well-trained and professional, then they're certainly going to enhance. Just as the same thing would apply if you have a well-qualified, good gang officer out there, you're going to have a better investigation than if you have somebody who is less trained. So we don't see the fact that interventionists take away from it. They certainly can enhance, add to, take us to a different level, depending upon their strengths and weaknesses.
And I think, too, what has happened in Los Angeles is the police and the community work together much more cohesively. The Watts Gang Task Force, Watts has had a tradition of not appreciating what the police offer, to say it politely. Now, routinely on Monday mornings, members from the community who have been there their entire lives literally hug the commanding officer for Southeast area. And there's deep relationship and problem solving that occurs on a regular basis, along with Councilmember Hahn being there. I think developing that kind of, well, I don't think it's a matter of fact, having that kind of synergy enables us to reduce crime, but to resolve problems that we are unaware even exist. People have reported crimes where property was returned because all the players in the community were talking at a regular meeting place. These relationships have probably helped us fast forward our progress in ensuring public safety. They've probably helped us, I can't say 25, 30 years, getting us ahead of where we would otherwise be, in my opinion.
Any questions? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all very, very much. Again, this is a motion to support federal legislation, and I just want to thank all of you from the interventionists, fire department, police department, the brass at every level, the street level officers, and the people in the community. I want to thank everybody for creating a live working model that hopefully can be emulated and changed a bit or what have you to suit the communities that are facing the same issues that we, thank God, are overcoming little by little here in the city of Los Angeles. So I want to thank all of you for your contribution.
What's the title of that HR 3526?
It is...
Shameless plug time.
The Tony Cardenas Community-Based Gang Intervention Act.
All right, thank you.
But this is a motion.
On the record.
But we're here on a motion by Councilman Parks, just so we're clear.
Exactly. And Garcetti. Okay.
You're trying to be humble.
So we move to adopt the CLA recommendation to adopt HR 3526. Okay. Without objection, such as the order of the committee. So that was item number 8. Now we move back to item number 2, report from the department.
For item number 2, the Information Technology Agency is here to report on their 2010-11 service changes and other budget-related items. This is a verbal update.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Randy Levin, General Manager, Chief Technology Officer for the City of Los Angeles. We're here today to report out on the impacts of all of the budget cuts on our department. I think I just want to start by saying that our department needs to be viewed as electricity at this point, because if we don't operate, then the city doesn't operate. And we've gotten to the point now where we can barely, in our terms, keep the lights on. In the past year, we've lost 178 employees, which represents 25% of our staff. Yet we still have even the same, if not more, amount of hardware and software to support. We haven't been able to really to eliminate any services. The only thing that we've done is elongate service levels, or the times to react.
Randy, at the peak of the number of personnel that were in ITA,
We were close to 800.
close to approximately 800, and then
Yeah.
now?
540, 556
Okay, 550
as of today, but we have more layoffs as part of this year's budget to go.
plus layoffs.
Right.
Plus more layoffs. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. The complement of staff that's left in terms of the 178 positions, which is what's been this past year, there've been the early retirement program, which for us meant the older skills and the harder to replace skills like COBOL programming, where we don't have kids coming out of college knowing how to do these things. So we have a lot of legacy systems that are going unsupported or have just intermittent support. And then the layoffs target the new employees. They're the new kids coming out of college. They're the ones that have the new skill sets and understand the new technologies, and they're the ones getting laid off. And in the middle of all this, we have a lot of defections still to the proprietaries, primarily the Department of Water and Power, a lot of our best and brightest, and that's still occurring. We lost 2 this week. So they're continuing to hire at a decent pace.
Now, hold on. I'm sure you miss them in many ways. However, when we lose somebody, for example, to one of the proprietary departments like DWP, say it's within our policy to allow you to go ahead and refill that position, does it tend, in this climate, is it tending to take weeks or months or even longer to get that expertise back in-house so we can service our city?
At this point, we're using any transfers to diminish the number of layoffs that we still have to do. So it doesn't allow us to replace those skills. It may allow us to retain some people that we were going to have to lay
But
off.
not necessarily that skill set.
Correct.
So if we're badly missing that skill set, then you're in a very tough position because you're not allowed to refill that particular skill set.
That's correct.
Right. Just as the city clerk was mentioning that they have a budget deficit, ITA's budget deficit is anticipated to be about $6.4 million. And that's because of our salary savings rate. That's because of having to cover all of the ERIP payouts. That's because of having to cover the extra furlough time that certain unions are now not taking, but that was subtracted from our budget. So all of those things create what we project to be a $6.4 million deficit. So we, like city clerk and like many other departments, are not able to backfill anything.
A couple of other points that we thought were relevant here, and one is that as we measure public safety, I know we're never really considered a public safety agency, yet when we look at our services now, 84% of our services directly or indirectly support public safety. When I started here 3.5 years ago, it was an important part of the portfolio. It wasn't the majority. Well, it was close to the majority, but it wasn't 84%. So almost every cut that we make now affects public safety. So that's critical. We can't eliminate a service because nobody will allow us to turn off a system. So what that results in is degraded service levels and frustration from the user community. In addition to that, the other things that exacerbate our situation here is that we have a lack of standards in the city, and people feel that they're empowered to purchase and procure whatever they want. It would be analogous to if Tony had to support 30,000 individualized, customized Priuses, And, we have 27,000 customized desktops. Obviously, that doesn't give us any economies of scale, and all that does is increase the amount of maintenance and the time to repair. Also, the age of the equipment is continuing to go up, and that also causes us more time to repair something. You probably noticed this weekend we upgraded the phone system, and we had some complications. We had technical complications. We had staff on furlough. So those kind of projects, we need to do them, but the older the equipment gets, the harder it gets, and the less staff we have that have the skill sets, it's harder for us to fix and repair. We have so many systems, so I just thought maybe I'd highlight a couple of the key areas just so that you have an basic understanding in more specifics. In payroll, in PACER, we have no capacity for any discretionary work. We are barely keeping up with all of the union changes that have been negotiated in all of the MOUs. We do not have adequate time to test all of those things, and we're at high risk of not being able to pay people correctly. So that's just one of the impact areas, and that is a dual responsibility with us and the controllers organization. With the SMS system, it's very analogous. We've lost a lot of staff. They are a specific skill set of PeopleSoft, which we have nowhere else in the city. It's a high market skill set on the outside. We can't hire those people in, and we're in very dire shape on PeopleSoft on SMS. And we've come back to council a few times for consulting dollars to help us so that we can continue to procure whatever hardware, software, assets we need to procure in the city. The computer and the network infrastructure have been very hard hit through this period of time. We have functions that were 24/7 that are no longer 24/7 because we don't have enough people. In area of system security, network communications, server support, etc. We are now so thinly staffed on the police and fire dispatch support. We used to have 3 people. Was it 4? Or was it 4 people per shift?
3.
It was 3, and we're not, we barely have enough now per shift, per location to support police and fire dispatch. Channel 35, I think we've heard a lot in council about Channel 35, how we've reduced all of the positions so we have no original programming. And 311, we do not have the graveyard shift, so we take calls during the day. When I started here, we were close to 80 people in 311, and we're closer to 40 people now. Yet the call volume keeps increasing, and the wait time is increasing, and people are getting frustrated there. So, the bottom line is I think that, we're doing the best we can. We have done some things to try and minimize some of the impacts here. We've reorganized the department. We've implemented standardized business hours from 7:30 to 5. We're prioritizing the work and trying to set new limits. We're reducing off-hour maintenance of systems. We are, hardly paying any, overtime for reimbursable work. We put all the staff on 540. So I think we've done about everything we can. Pretty much every contract that we have that we could negotiate within our purview, we have renegotiated. And what I mean by that is, for example, Microsoft contracts that are within our department, not Microsoft contracts that are citywide, where we would be getting bigger bang for the buck. So I think that, as I said, we're doing the best we can, but every day and every other loss at this point is very, very hard for our organization to absorb.
So you have approximately 250 people less than you had a few years ago.
Yes.
And your responsibilities are nowhere near, they haven't been reduced anywhere near that percentage of impact.
No, they've actually increased. And I mean, to give an example, I mean, it's been documented and well proven that in times of a recession, IT actually has more demand. And June was just sitting here. You heard what she said. If I had another programmer, if I had another systems person, I could automate this. So she just made my case for me, unbeknownst to her. Anyway.
Because every time somebody automates, or every time somebody goes to a higher level system of electronics, of computers or what have you, be it tracking, whatever it is, then very likely there's some burden, direct or tertiary, to your department.
Well, that's correct. So there's a couple of things that happens. If things are not done in a planned manner, integrated manner, it causes more burden on our department. But I understand why departments want to do that, because they've lost staff, and in order to make up for the loss of staff, they want to hire their own programmers and program whatever they want. But what that does is it creates further demand on the network, further demand on the staff. It increases our system security risks, where cybersecurity is becoming much more difficult to detect and then remediate, and we don't have the staff to really be able to handle the way things are going.
And as you said in the beginning of your presentation, you're tracking at a over $6 million deficit for this fiscal year?
That is correct, in our salary account. We don't have any vacancies, so as opposed to when June was up here and we talked about, positions, eliminating positions, we're talking about people, not positions. This is all about people.
And what's the main demand in the budget process toward your department in order to make up that difference of $6 million?
The main demand? I'm sorry.
What action did the council and the mayor's office expect your department to do in order to get in line with that budget?
We've been looking at contracts. We've been looking at consolidations. I mean, we've been trying to look at every line item in our budget to figure out how to reduce those costs. But it's very hard when these are uncontrollable costs. I mean, these are not controlled by us. They're controlled by the CAO or the council of the mayor. And so all the general managers are having to do the same thing.
Question?
The Google account, is that, other than the costs incurred, does that save us any personnel in operating the numerous systems that we've had?
We did, we had projected we were going to eliminate personnel. They actually got eliminated before we even finished the project. So, through other mechanisms. So we're almost finished now. The staff that we did have that did remain, we redeployed them to other tasks.
That did save us positions then with
yes.
the technology change?
Yes, it did.
And are we looking at any other technology change that would can save a considerable number of staff, or we assign them to something else?
We're working on something now that we think will do that, and I'd be more than happy to discuss that with you.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
All right. Wish you had better news, but thank you for the facts. Okay.
Thank you.
That's item number 2. Is anybody here from the public to speak on item number 2? Seeing and hearing no one come forward, there's no action required on this item. Thank you very much, Randy. Thank you. We now move to item number 3.
For item 3, the General Services Department is here to report on basically the same thing, 2010-11 service changes and other budget-related items.
Actually, I have worse news.
You're not going to be the bright spot in our afternoon? No?
Well, if you look at the particular deficit that's being projected for this year, we're looking between $8 to $12 million. And if you look at general services, the loss of positions with ERIP and with attrition and layoffs, you're probably looking at about 500 positions. We lost $34 million. We lost $7 million in furloughs, which equate to close to another 100 positions. And actually, we had probably about close to $10 million worth of new facilities come on board, and the maximum we received was $1.5 million for that. And as she was saying, she's the electricity, we're the heart. If the heart stops, everything stops. As we know, we're the heart of the city. And if it comes to public safety, for instance, you take the police department. If you have no gas, you can't drive your cars. You can't fly your helicopters. If you have no people to purchase your equipment, you can't buy bullets, you can't buy cars, you can't buy the bulletproof vests for the individuals. Because we are GSD, ITA, we are the infrastructure for the city. If we fail, the city fail. The difficulty is you don't see it. It's like a heart attack. You don't feel the impact until it happens. And if you look at probably cuts or whatever, because if you look at the city, the top 3 departments that have the most money for general fund is police, fire, GSD. So if you don't cut police, you don't cut fire, we're the next ones. But if we do not provide support to fire and police, they cannot perform their jobs. And everything that we do, because it's a very difficult question when they ask me, what are your core services? Everything I do is the core services. Is that just depending upon what happens during the day? One day I might be a real estate agent, one next day I might be a custodian. This morning I was replacing lights in the council member's office that went out in his restroom. It's just depending what happens. And it's a situation where when we make cuts, for instance, if we decide to make public safety our priority, we need to make sure the support services are there for those services, because if we don't, they cannot perform their job. If we don't have fuel, the helicopters cannot go out and fight fires. And that's why I said we just can't cut in silos anymore. We have to work together and determine what's priority and to support everything from A to Z to support that particular services. And like, for instance, in custodial, we lost 159 custodians. 159. And we're at the point now that, well, we're not even picking up trash at some of the desk side. What we're trying to do is to encourage people to recycle more and to go to zero waste, because 99% of what you put in your trash can, you can recycle. So on the bottom line too is our employees have done an outstanding job based on the resources that we have left. And like I said, we're very proud of what we do. We're working hard with the resources that we have. But any help that you can give us, whatever, we really appreciate it. And some things, for instance, we're looking at, say, for instance, if the city decided to close down twice a month. So that's the services that, no, you don't need the custodians here or certain levels of security here, or you could save money on utilities. Because as long as the city is open, there is a demand for our service. And the challenge that we have is you have other areas that are being funded, but their demand does not reduce. For instance, you take in fleet services, I think we lost close to $4 million just in salaries, I think probably about 70 positions, but we have 2,000 vehicles that we need to get out of the fleet. I'm not saying they don't need the vehicles. I'm saying I don't have the mechanics to maintain them. And that comes down to safety. You do not want any unsafe vehicles on this street, to making sure that we have the decent level of mechanics to maintain the equipment. And it's just a very difficult time. We're doing the very best that we can do with the resources that we have. At the same time, I tell my employees that the city of LA is still a great place to work. Although it's a furlough, it's a good place to work with a furlough. So I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. One of the questions that I have has to do with isn't there an example that happened immediately after the fiscal year started, July 1st, where you have sanitation trucks that need to roll, but who fixes those sanitation trucks? Who makes sure that they're signed off and safe to go back out on the street? Wasn't there something that happened where some trash didn't get picked up? It wasn't that the sanitation workers weren't there to go pick them up. Didn't it have to do with the fact that the trucks weren't able to get serviced and or signed off on time for them to roll out?
Correct. The reason with that, because at that time, the individuals that maintained the vehicles were being furloughed. So we were able to sit down with the CEO and also with the sanitation and have those individuals pull off of furloughs. At the same time, we have the police officers, sworn officers, OPS, that are exempt from furlough, but it's costing us $555,000. We had 136 people we had to lay off, but it takes 3 months to lay them off, which costs us an additional $1 million to do that. So that means for every 2 weeks I waited, that's additional 5 people I have to lay off.
So basically, the example that occurred the reality that occurred with some of those sanitation trucks. Actually, my street was one of the streets. I mean, it
Right.
wasn't the end of the world, but, you know, I get home and I'm upset at my boys because they haven't brought the trash cans
Right.
in. Then I looked around my cul-de-sac and said, I guess everybody's mad at their kids because they're all out. So I looked in the trash can, sure enough, they were still
GSD's
there.
fault.
They were still there, and then when we looked into it, it was simply that. I
Yeah.
wasn't upset, but it certainly does explain what you said earlier. If we don't have the personnel to support police, we could have the same thing happening. We could have a room full of police officers where all of a sudden 30 of them are standing there saying, I've reported to work, I'm being paid, I want to get out on the street and protect, the community, but my car isn't ready, or, you know, my equipment isn't ready, or what have you.
Right.
And GSD is part of that support system, correct?
Like, for example, you take fuel, we have about 2 or 3 clerks that process the payments for those. If we lose those positions, we can't purchase fuel. So the vehicles or whatever the city operates on as related to fuel can't get fuel. And like, for instance, you take at the heliport, we maintain all of the helicopters. And we had to absorb an additional money for the furloughs, because if we furlough those people, we're not out there available to repair those helicopters if there are fires, if there's crime in the street. It's just, people don't see it because it's like everything else. You really don't appreciate lights or water until it cuts off. When the lights go off, then you think about DWP. It's like us when we stop, because everything for years and years, and we still do it now. Every day you come in, we take care of our services, but it's very, very difficult now. And I think the city as a whole has to look and determine what it's going to do the right way and what it's not going to do. You take a lot of the facilities we're looking at, we have a lot of individuals leaving the city, so we're doing some analysis and space analysis and see if we can, we're doing it right now at Figueroa Plaza, and after we finish that, we're coming to Civic Center where we can move more people down into some of this vacant space, because what helps us, if you close a building down, there's no need for us. We're at the point that we spread so thin we can't spread it out anymore. It's not, the peanut butter is gone. As thin as they can get.
Yeah, staff in my office are taking the trash and throwing it in a central bin.
Right.
And then so that the janitor,
Right.
who used to come to each
Right.
office room, in my office, in our floor.
Right.
Instead, now everybody consolidates it, so
Right.
a person walks into our office and goes to one trash can.
Yeah.
But doesn't have to go to all
Right.
the individual trash
Right,
cans.
correct.
So that's certainly an example of the change in service,
Right.
correct?
Correct.
Any questions?
A couple.
What's that?
A couple. The leasing buildings, if we take our folks out of leasing buildings and put them into city facilities, we can save dollars on the leases.
Depending how long your lease is.
Well, I know that, I found out today, the city attorney has 222 South Hill.
Right.
They've got 3 floors, and I was told they have 1 floor, they have 10 people on 1 floor.
Right.
I don't know how much we're paying for the lease, but if we analyze, and that's one thing that I pushed when we bought the Public Works building, is that if we own the properties, then we reduce the number of leases, save money, some consolidation. I know that things are tough, and they're not going to get any better according to the projections. The issue of, that's one thing I think we need to look at. And the maintenance that we have to do, I wouldn't be opposed if they clean the offices every other day.
Right.
And if you've got a reduced force, instead of doing it every day, we're here 5 days a week. So if they took
Some areas we're doing that already.
Pardon me?
Some areas we're doing that already.
But I mean, like the council offices.
Right.
You got 15 offices, and they've got crews that do a great job.
Right.
But if they did it every other day, or they had, I mean, the office can get by, as Councilmember Cardenas says, you have a central bin for the trash, a
Right.
central bin for the recycle. So maybe we can make some cutbacks there, because I don't think you can get more personnel. I think that the bottom line is you're not going to get any personnel, so you have to come up with some modification. The issue of the biggest budget items, what's the biggest budget item that you have in your department?
If you really look, it's probably fleet, because you're dealing with the number of vehicles you have to maintain, and also with fuel that you purchase, and also with the helicopter mechanics, probably fleet.
And I know the mayor's given back all the city cars, and we've got Priuses that are, well, the cars that the mayor's office had for personnel, I was told,
He's given
I've seen them, they drive their own cars now.
Some of them are, but not all of them are not.
All right, well, the ones that were given back.
Put it this way, it's less than it was before.
Okay. Are we selling those?
We're selling the ones that, based on MECLA that we can sell, I think they have to be 5 or 6 years old.
Because we have some cars, I understand, are way over 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Some of those old Honda Prius, or the Honda hybrids with 100,000+ miles.
Right. And another difficult challenge we have is that, I think the last 3 or 4 years, we haven't been purchasing new vehicles, which causes our maintenance to go up. Because the longer you keep a vehicle, the more maintenance that you have to provide for that vehicle.
And I see that with the shops where they have fewer mechanics.
Right.
And the demand goes up because you got cars that aren't in warranty. You can't take them to the dealer.
Right.
So someone has to service those. Right. What are other cities doing when it comes to this? If you talk to other city managers,
I said we've looked at different things or whatever, especially the city of New York put out different reports, different things they're looking at. And a lot of the things that they're doing, you see the city of LA is way ahead of them. Like, for instance, with consolidation of properties, for instance, you take our leases, we've cut that from 30 million to about 15 to 16 million over the last several years, and we're in the process of doing more and more. And if you look at the city of LA, we probably are cut or in situations worse than other cities have taken drastic cuts. We get general services, like I said, we've lost probably 35 to 40% of our staff. For the last 2 years, we got very little money over for new facilities, but we were able to open them. Another example is that because we didn't get money, we can't maintain the new jail that's supposed to be open on January 1st.
Well, they don't have detention officers, and I've been told that they're going to take police officers out of the field and put them in the jail. Now, we have a commitment to 9963 police officers, which we assume they'd be police officers doing police work, not doing detention officer work. But I understand that is the movement that the department's going, which I think would create some problems in the field where they're going to take those bodies out of the field operations, which is another topic we need to discuss at another time. But I would say, coming from the position of the personnel, as the chairperson of the personnel committee, bodies aren't going to be coming through. Hiring's not going to be coming through. The next year's budget, we've been told, is worse than this year's budget. So obviously changes have to be made to tighten the belt and to continue providing what essential services. And I think maybe we'll come to the realization that we can't provide every service to every single person.
Right.
And somehow we've tried to do that for too long a period of time. We've stretched ourselves to the point that the rubber band is breaking. But I commend you for what you're doing with it. I think if you came out with a direction on the custodial personnel, I know that we have a district office.
Right.
Many council officers have district offices. Say you're going to get the service every other day instead of every day. It won't be detrimental, and maybe the central bins for trash and for recyclables is another way to try and save some of those folks. But we have a man, Felix, in the district who does a great job in the municipal building.
Been there for years.
He does a great job, all by himself.
Right.
We used to have 2 people. Now he's done it by himself. And I mean, he's there for a long time.
For right now, right.
But I want to assure you, we appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah. Like I said, our people, considering the predicament, have done an outstanding job. Like I said, I'm biased. I believe we have the best employees in the city. I've always said that.
They're always smiling. They're always very happy.
Right.
And like you say, they're happy to have a job.
Yeah, like I said, I go out 2 or 3 times a month to talk with them, whatever, and try to encourage them to answer any questions or issues they're having and explain to them what's going on. Because usually when the information come out, they're the last one to get it, and usually it's not right. And I want them to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. Well, you do have a challenging task before you.
Right.
But I don't see it getting any better in the next year.
Oh, I know. Okay. It's just, work with us.
All right. I hear you. Okay.
And the CAO.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tony.
Okay.
All right. Item number 4.
On item 4, the city administrative officer has submitted their first construction projects report. This is for fiscal year 2011, 2010-11, and this item is also referred to Budget and Finance Committee.
Thank you very much. Alma Gibson with the CAO's office. Once again, yes, this is our first construction projects report for the fiscal year. I want to start off by saying that the first section of this report is basically providing you with a thumbnail status report of the city's major capital improvement expenditure program projects, as well as general obligation bond programs. Also, the second and third sections within this report provide recommendations that consist mainly of funding adjustments related to the city's construction projects, and these transactions are definitely needed in order to keep the projects on track. Again, the financial adjustments, they consist primarily of reimbursements from various cities departments from general obligation bond funds, MICLA financings, and Prop K funds. Of the total $15.9 million in transfers and appropriations in this report, approximately $5.7 million is recommended for appropriations to GSD to perform construction work on various projects. And they include projects such as a project for the Pueblo Capital projects, the Sequeira's Mural and Interpretive Center project, the Recreation and Park projects, and for the SID Tech Lab. Also, approximately $4.6 million is for the Potrero Canyon Stabilization Park Development Project. And we're including approximately $4.3 million for staff reimbursements for work on the Seismic Bridge Improvement Program for this fiscal year. I do want to add that the positions for this program have been authorized by resolution, and funding is for services provided by city staff, which may include program, project, and construction management, including monitoring expenditures. And finally, I do want to point out that the estimated annual impact due to operations and maintenance costs for all of these recommended transactions is going to be approximately $266,000, which have been accounted for in the department's budget. So now we have representatives for projects listed in this report to answer any additional questions you may have.
What's going on at Big Plaza?
That's a good question. What I like to do is I ask the project manager for that program, as well as my colleague, to come up and discuss details on that project.
Hi, Jackie Vernon Wagner with the CAO's office. Your question, sir?
What's going on at Big Plaza? Apparently there is some MICLA funding there and some other elements.
There is, it was $15 million appropriated, allotted for tenant improvements and repairs at Big Plaza. To date, $11 million of that has been appropriated.
Okay.
And, sorry.
So the tenant improvements and repairs?
Yes, sir.
And were those, and as far as the tracking of that building, because we purchased that building, and it's 600,000 square feet, so it's obviously a large facility. And how much of that was within the estimate of our responsibilities when we purchased it? Does anybody know? I remember we discussed extensively the purchase price. We discussed extensively the review of the facility before we purchased it to know what we were getting into. But it just caught my attention that this amount of money is being utilized on a building that isn't brand new, but it's in relatively good shape based on the report that we got.
Let me try to answer that. Maria Cardenas with the CAO's office. We purchased the building for about $219 million, and as part of the long-term analysis, cost-benefit analysis, we looked at over the life of the acquisition, we would eventually fully occupy it with the city employees. We have a large number of private tenants in there. Right now, it's a challenge filling it up with city departments because everybody with ERIP departments are reducing in size. So we're looking at the best possible mix for restacking it with private and public tenants. As part of the acquisition of the building, we were, council authorized a $15 million capital repair program so that the building would, we could maintain it at a Class A status. Of that $15 million, we have already spent $11 million on major repairs, we still have the balance of that to go. We did not have any money in this year's budget for that. Also, we reported that we would need money to retrofit the private space for use by public employees as space became available. When the Recreation and Parks Department moved from Garland to this building, we did get $4 million for the restacking. Right now, we have $1 million for possible restacking. We plan to use a Recovery Zone Economic Development Bond, MICLA, where we get 45% of the interest reimbursed by the Fed, so it would be the least expensive MICLA. And those are the two projects that you see in the major project review.
And the City Hall in Pacoima, otherwise the City Hall in District 7, how's that coming along?
That project is almost, it should be completed this month.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
So it's pretty much on budget, or?
It was within budget, and we also, for the $5 million of the total cost was also Recovery Zone MICLA. We had citywide about $20 million that we replaced with, we used that instead of our commercial paper MICLA.
Any questions, Mr. Sai?
Proposition CC, I understand there's a court intervention on that pachyderm exhibit that's preventing the opening of that $40 million pachyderm.
The Pachyderm Forest exhibit project is a $42 million project. It should be completed and open to the public by the end of November.
Are you aware of a court decision regarding the opening of that? A recent court decision that's put
I think
hold?
there was
Just recent, like last week?
a petition, somebody petitioned the courts to not add elephants. We have one elephant.
Right, Billy.
So that my understanding that remains to be determined by the courts if they're going to uphold that request or they're going to allow them to go ahead and continue to operate with that element of possibly adding elephants as the zoo manages that facility.
Right. The zoo director and the Bureau of Engineering reported last week at the Administrative Oversight Committee that some representatives from their departments were going to be deposed this week, and that's
Okay.
the only update that I have.
So you're aware of that process?
Right, and it's not going to delay the opening, though.
Pardon me?
That's not supposed to delay the opening for the packaging
Just
exhibit.
Billy will be all by himself.
In the meantime.
It has been and it remains by himself to this day.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. With that, without objection, we'll approve the CO report as recommended. Okay. Now we move to item number 7.
For item 7, there is a motion for its partners relative to our request that the city controller present the findings of the Information Technology Agency phone lines audit and that the ITA present its response to the controller's findings. The Audits and Governmental Efficiency Committee have recommended to receive and file the motion.
Okay.
Well, I have a question on number 7.
Anybody here to answer questions on number 7?
We had, thank you, we had 40,000 phone lines and 7.2 million each year for phone lines, and now that's been reduced, reducing the number of idle lines to 6,605, continues to maintain 11,890 idle phone lines that's costing us $237,000 a month. Why can't we eliminate phone lines that are idle and save $237,000? Why do we continue to have phone lines that are idle in this tough economic situation?
Let me clarify. We don't continue to have the idle phone lines. As we were assessing which lines, I'm Laura Ito with Information Technology Agency, and as we discovered phone lines that were idle, meaning that we ran a report that showed that there were no outgoing calls in the last 3 months. That was because of the technology, that was how we had to define idle.
Okay.
We sent out a listing of all of those lines based on location to the responsible departments and asked them to respond as to whether they needed to retain the lines. When we got back responses, we said, okay, we'll delete those lines if they've been clear that they want them deleted. For the lines where we didn't get back responses, we said, well, we'll wait 2 months while we do a soft disconnect, meaning no calls can come in, but we're not actually canceling the line. And that way, if we hear from somebody, I tried to reach this number, it's supposed to be a city number, we still need it, we would be able to restart the line without having the $75 reconnect charge. We didn't want to just arbitrarily shut off all of those phone lines. The total of doing the soft disconnect was approximately the $237 a month. The controller recommended, and we agreed then, to minimize the soft disconnect period, so we didn't have a $237,000 per month expenditure on idle lines. And we were able to disconnect 6,605 idle lines. Other lines we found that there aren't 11,000 lines remaining.
Well, that's what it says in the report, 11,890 idle phone lines at a cost of over $237 a month. This was a report, page 8 of 16, ITGA committee briefing notes. And there was a motion by Mr. Koretz, Mr. Cardenas. I'm just curious, how many idle phone lines? I can understand the soft disconnect, but if we don't have 11,890, how many do we have currently that are idle, or we suppose are idle, suspected are idle?
We don't have any remaining. Well, I would say we have about 1,800 lines that we still have to investigate.
Okay.
Meaning we actually have to send out a technician to see where the line is located, see if it's related to an elevator or a fax machine or some kind of a line that isn't a regular phone line where we can just call up the number and see if anybody answers and see if they still need the phone or see if it remains to be a city number. So to the extent that we can do that kind of investigation from a desk, we've had staff make all of those calls. Now it really remains for a phone technician and electrician to go out and see what the line is being used for and see if it's still needed. So for those where it requires that kind of field work, we still have lines remaining. What we've done so that we don't accumulate more idle lines is get information out of the PACER system so that when somebody leaves city employment, our department automatically sends out a notification to the department that has lost the employee, and it says, we need you to tell us if you still need to keep this phone line because we would propose to disconnect it. One of the questions that came up in audits and governmental efficiency is out of the people that left for whatever reason last year, how many were we able to disconnect? And it was a disappointingly low number of lines that we were able to disconnect. Out of about 2,200 departures from the city, we were only able to disconnect 93 lines. And that was because a lot of the lines are PBX lines. Those are lines that are on city equipment for which the city only pays 40 cents per month per line. So it's really not valuable for us to disconnect those lines. We're hoping that as we centralize our staff, we have a request into general services to move our staff from leased facilities back to city halls, which will save a lot of money on the leases, but will also save money on phone lines. Right. As other departments do that, and we bring people back to central locations, we will reactivate those PBX lines. So we don't want to shut them off because once we stop them, we can't get them back. Okay. So there wasn't an opportunity to really save money on the disconnects with most of the departures last year.
Very well. Thank you.
Okay. So, thank you. No more questions from the committee. We'll note and file the motion and also direct ITA to provide an update on the status of the idle phone lines in the next 90 days. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the items on today's agenda for this Information Technology and Government Affairs Committee. Is there anybody here for general public comment? Seeing no one come forward for general public comment to this committee, general public comment is now closed. And with that, this committee